the okay. All right. So before I forget, there have been several requests to do catch up for some of the Connect assignments, right? Right? And the answer that I have been given is, well, towards the end of the semester, remind me, I might open up the Connect assignments for a little bit of time to give you an opportunity to get in and, do catch up here and there. So consistent with what I had told you, some of you, and in class collectively too, as we did, numerous times at the front end of the course, that I would do that is to open up the Connect assignments. I will open them up on Friday afternoon, probably at around 1 or 2 o'clock, early afternoon. And the window will shut on Sunday night at midnight. And so that will give you, 55, 60 hours or so, to complete the presumably onesies and twosies that you have to do. What's that sound? Is that great? So that's what we do. And I do have it in my agenda, and I have it ready to go, and there's a 99.999% chance that it will all happen. This is a backup, because I'm always a backup kind of guy. I like having backup and having the systems open. I want you to send me an email, no later than 2 o'clock on Friday, tomorrow Friday. Tomorrow, no later than 2 o'clock, reminding me of the Connect assignments. Okay. I think I already will, but at least, if all else fails, we have that redundancy in the system. Okay? Okay then, let us proceed. Lights. That's better. Okay, so what we want to do today then really is formally wrap up the course, so to speak. And so I always take advantage of this last class and sort of impart to you sort of the overriding kind of themes that exist within the discipline of marketing as a whole. Okay? The field that I've spent many, many decades working in and understanding that kind of thing. And so here we will sort of give you an overview of sort of the main highlights of what the discipline is all about, ergo what we have done within the course. We'll highlight some key things. So yeah, there'll be a bit of repetition and sort of familiarity with some of these points that I already have stressed throughout the course, but it serves to reinforce them, because this is really what marketing as a discipline is all about. So that would be the first thing. And then secondly, I also want to give you a sense of where the discipline of marketing is going in the future from a practitioner perspective, okay? And I like doing that because this is really the kind of thinking that CMO, the Chief Marketing Officers, marketers right now are thinking about. This is what it is sort of keeping them up at night, this kind of thinking, okay? And so we want to sort of convey that to you, so you have a sense, anyway, of where the discipline is going. So that is primarily the overriding kind of motivational points that I would initiate up front. So yeah, we will talk about some of the key areas here. We'll talk about core strategy. I've mentioned that before consistently throughout the course, so we'll talk about that a bit. And like I said, I want to give you a direction as to where the field is going. Now, you will know from our session 1, which unfortunately had to be delivered, because of my COVID, had to be delivered by video, have to remember. And number 2, by the first week, essentially. Week 1, was the first week had to be delivered on video. And during those videos, you will remember, I'm hoping that we talked about the evolution of marketing and how marketing is sort of evolved over time. And we made the point at that time that, according to many prolific marketing writers, Philip Kotler and others, that, there are well over 100, 150 documented definitions of what marketing is. Right, so that's a lot. Those are a lot of definitions, right? So what does that mean then? What's the critical emergent thought from that simple point? Well, the extension to that then is that, yeah, there's a lot going on in the field, right? It's a broad field. It's all encompassing. You can take it in a variety of directions and spin it in a variety of ways, right? That's the implication. However, notwithstanding that, we said, okay, we'll talk about the current kind of approach right now. Again, or I will remind you what the current approach is. But at that time, what I did then is that I took you on sort of an evolutionary journey of marketing thinking, where we started essentially about 50, 60 years ago. And given that marketing as a discipline is only about 120, 130 years old, max, that represents about half of its lifetime. So yeah, we started about 50 years ago, and I took you on sort of an evolutionary journey to try to map out for you how marketing thinking has sort of evolved over the last half century or so. And the way by which we did that is that we adopted key definitions from the AMA, the American Marketing Association, at these points in time. And what that served to do then was to give us a snapshot of marketing thinking at those particular junctures in time. Are you with me? And that's what we did. And we left off where we are right now. And we will remind you where we are right now, essentially. So this is what we did at that time. So really, marketing really started off with this whole notion then of, building stuff. There was an emphasis on manufacturing. And we also recognized that it was really, as that whole discipline started to evolve, it was really at its core about the 4 Ps, right? The 4 Ps, which is a very nice new framework, undoubtedly, but things have evolved since then, of course. But at that time, it was fundamentally about the 4 Ps, coupled with a recognition of that economic notion of exchange that we've spoken about over and over again. So that essentially was what marketing was all about. And so you can say that, okay, well, that's kind of cool, but, it's changed a lot since then, And so we sort of recognized that. And so we recognized then that it sort of has evolved to kind of where we are right now, which is captured by this definition. So when we look at this definition, as a snapshot of current thinking of marketing, you've seen this before in the video. You know, we recognize then that it identifies what marketing is all about. We recognize then that, yeah, we still, we still love our 4P framework, absolutely. But the notion here is that it has evolved. It's evolved to really where the consumer is front and center. So our marketing thinking right now, the central thinking of marketers then is that it is about the customer, right? It is about the customer. So Steve Jobs said, it's about the customer. What do they want? You know, what do they need? What can we bring to them? It all starts with the customer experience. And as Jobs said, it all starts with what, I'll quote him with the word, what incredible benefits can we as marketers bring to the customer, right? And we recognize that benefits are very important because, as I say, why are benefits so important? Because customers, they buy, they don't buy
features.
right up. Absolutely. Right? So we recognize that that is essentially the key thing. So yeah, we recognize that. Furthermore, we also realize that, you know, marketing isn't necessarily a force for bad. We recognize here, because we are enlightened and we know what marketing is all about, we recognize its rightful place in the world and in society and in overall business functioning, namely that it is a force for good. This we realize, right? And in fact, that whole notion is so important that we have embedded it into the latest definition of marketing. Society at large. Doing good for society at large. Right? So we look at it as a force for doing good. Now, having said that, this poses a little bit of a conundrum in reality from a practical perspective. And though this whole approach is absolutely, steadily growing and reflects, I would say, our current thinking, it does represent a bit of a problem. And the problem is with, I would argue, the general consuming public. If you mention the word marketing to the general population out there, and I'm talking about these non-business educated people, I'm talking about, everyday consumers, who are just, trying to scratch out a living, going about their daily lives. If you mention the word marketing to these folks, guess what? It's like saying a dirty word. In their view, marketing is a dirty, dirty business, generally speaking. It's not to us, we know that. But generally speaking, that is what most people think, right? So it is absolutely in the average person's mind, squarely aligned with trying to manipulate things, trying to sell and stuff that they don't want. What exists in their mind then is that 7 o'clock phone call with a telemarketer saying, have we got a deal for you? That's what marketing is to them, right? Or that heavy duty, buy now, but wait, there's more kind of thing on infomercials, et cetera, et cetera. That's what marketing is to them. So yeah, it's disruptive and it's, a bit of a nuisance and it's not pleasant. Very, very negative. Right? So that's what exists. So that's a problem for us, okay? So we realize then that there's sort of this dissonance kind of thing that's existing for us as marketers. The general population hates us. However, we know that we're trying to do something good. That poses a little bit of a dissonance for us, right? There's this conflict for us in our mind. And further exacerbating that then is this. That, and the numbers vary here, but we also realize that, over 80% of consumers will trust online the recommendations and the opinions of perfect strangers. They'll read those reviews, and 80% of them will trust those reviews that are written by perfect strangers. They don't even know who they're coming from, but they will trust those. And why? Well, we recognize that there's that perceived credibility associated with these reviews, right and wrong, and that's the whole thing itself. but there's that perceived objectivity associated with that word of mouth. So, yeah, 80% of them trust those recommendations. And so the flip side to that then is that, what does that mean? That means then that only about 10, 15, 20% max of consumers, the research shows, actually trust advertising. Only about 15, 20% of consumers out there trust advertising. And advertising, we will know, is one of the major ways by which we as marketers communicate with our target market, right? Advertising is a key way. We also have a bunch of others, right? We talked about that. It's a promotional mix, direct marketing, advertising, personal sales, promotions, sales promotion, PR, publicity, et cetera, et cetera. So we've got all these things, right? But of course, of all those, advertising is certainly the central way. So if we recognize then that our primary way by which we communicate with consumers is advertising, and only about 15 or 20% of them believe the messages that we're conveying to them, what does that mean? What does that mean? That means we have a problem on our hands, right? And like I said, and I will say it again, the juxtaposition to that then is that they will believe, 80% of them will believe what perfect strangers are saying. They believe strangers, they don't believe us as potential market. That's a problem for us. So again, that whole notion then serves to reinforce my point then that we, as marketers, have this issue. We have this problem of credibility, I would say. So, therefore, yes, we recognize that. We say that we want to do something good here. But we have a situation on our hands here that we need to think about, right? So what's the solution? Just laid out a problem, I've laid out a perfectly reasonable, rational appraisal of the current situation, crisis and credibility, we may call it. Maybe I'll write an article. That's something to do with credibility. Crisis and credibility. Crisis and credibility. So, what's the solution to that? In the email that you send me, put that crisis of credibility. Okay? Article titled Crisis and Credibility, okay? I don't want to stop it. And if I wait, it will slide up. Okay? So what's the solution? Tell me. We're nearing the end, you guys, 4th year on the cusp of completing your MOM program. You're finishing off a comprehensive, robust course in marketing, which is what our course was, by the way, comprehensive and robust. It wasn't a pile of fluff. It was very, very comprehensive, carefully thought through, carefully constructed by myself, to be the best possible product, by the way. But, so you guys tell me, what's the solution? We understand what the problem is, right? To develop a solution, we need to understand what the problem is. And I hope you understand what the problem is. So tell me, what's the solution?
Getting customers to interact with each other.
Interact with each other?
Since customers will give the review of other customers.
Okay, but what about customers that hate us and they tell everybody how bad we are? Do we want other customers to be interacting with them? Because we recognize when we talk about these reviews and we talk about word of mouth, we realize that there's a greater likelihood that it's those dissatisfied consumers that are going to be spreading negative word of mouth. So do we want to stimulate that?
No.
Well, it's something to think about anyway, right? It's a key thing. So, but your point is well taken, but we just need to be very cautious. Yeah.
So you earn credibility, just like you earn respect, right? So like even in the case that she said that there might be negative word of mouth, what do you do in that case, right?
Yeah.
So if there's a consumer who puts in like a negative review, do you have a customer support team which has a service, they reach out, sort of address the issue, send some other product, do something, give a replacement, whatever it is, solve the issue so that eventually it changes and you're able to build that credibility in the mind of the consumer, which will eventually translate to it.
Couldn't agree more. Well said. My thoughts exactly. Yeah. Are you occupying a place in my head? You're living rent free in my mind, aren't you? I'm gonna have to start charging you rent. So yeah, no, exactly, right, step by step, so yeah. And in fact, now that you mentioned it, just to put a point on that, I mean, it raises the issue. You raise it, so let me just talk about this a little bit, What essentially you implied was this whole notion of brand failure, right? We did talk about critical harm prices and potential brand failure and service failure on the service side, and it's a big deal, right, in service market. And so then, and I think I might have mentioned it to you in the past, but what?
You spoke about Maple Leaf and how they
That's
managed
right.
that issue and then versus how the oil spill was managed and
That's
the
exactly
difference
right.
in how it was.
Absolutely, yeah. So what do you want to do when there's a major brand failure like that? Well, typically as a leader, the CEO, what you want to do then is to get out in front of the situation, present that face to the general consumer public of honesty and credibility, offer an apology. And importantly, at a low level, if you're running a restaurant or something and something bad happens, what do you do to correct that with the consumer? So you offer a heartfelt acknowledgement, heartfelt apology to the consumer, very often that's all it takes. But in addition to that, you also want to correct it immediately, you want to act fast, and importantly, you want to offer the consumer some kind of remuneration, some kind of a freebie, give them something, right? And that is sort of the general template on how to handle a service failure, right, generally speaking. And by the way, I can't remember whether I told you this or not, but an important and an interesting notion is what we call the service failure paradox. Did I talk to you about that? This is an aside. It's an interesting kind of a notion that occurs, and what we find is that, and this is what we call the service failure paradox, and this occurs when a consumer has experienced service failure, and the service provider has rectified it, corrected it, recovered appropriately well. We find that those consumers then who have experienced the service failure and it has been rectified to their satisfaction are more satisfied at the end of that experience than those consumers who have never experienced the failure in the first place. And that's what we call the service recovery paradox. And that's an interesting notion. And the research is very clear about this, right? Consistent studies, both scholarly and practitioner kind of studies bear this paradox out. So it's quite an interesting. But at any rate, that's what you need to do, right? So yeah, step by step, that's what we as marketers need to do that. And to do that and to always superimpose on what you just said, that what do we want to do, and this is why I'm always stressing it, we always want to behave ethically and honestly at all times, right? And part of the problem in the business world, especially on the finance side, is that there are too many self-serving crooks, right? Who will, sort out these Ponzi schemes, et cetera, right? As soon as money is involved, it's like people's ethical behavior goes right out the window, right? Sadly. So, yeah. So that's the key thing then. That's the key thing. Always want to behave ethically and honestly, right? So that social responsibility then, that ethical conduct cannot be overstated, is the point here, right? And that is key. So if we do that, then as marketers, things will start to turn around. Sadly, what is the reality? Sadly, there will always be those low-end kind of people that will always try to rip other people off, right? Sadly. But we need to be cautious about sort of dealing with that and not tainting the entire profession, right? So those are some thoughts with regard to that. Furthermore, when we look at marketing as a whole, we would be somewhat remiss if we didn't at least contrast our discipline of marketing to other disciplines, like finance, accounting, HR, strategy, et cetera, right? So again, and you saw this before, this comes out of the 1990 work of Montgomery and Day, where they suggest that there are 4 major questions here that we can ask that serves to differentiate marketing from other disciplines. You know, first is an identification of the target market, right? Who are our customers? And so here we recognize that marketing is the only business discipline that seeks to attain a deep psychological understanding of the consumer. Deep psychological understanding. What about finance? How about HR? Are these guys concerned about finance, accounting? Are they interested in attaining that deep psychological kind of understanding of the individual consumer? No, obviously not. We in marketing, we do. So psychology, social psychology, critically important here in marketing. More so for some than others. So yeah, you know, it's about attaining that deep understanding of who the customers are. Furthermore, not only are we at the individual level, using the individual consumer as a unit of analysis in our exploration and our understanding, we also seek to understand how markets overall function, right? At more of a macro perspective. So what are markets? That's where buyers and sellers come together, they bring products together, there's that notion of exchange, there's that supply chain that works in the background, all that stuff, regulatory framework, all that kind of stuff, that all happens. Where does it all happen? It happens in the market. And so, yeah, as marketers, then we need to understand some of these major dynamics also. So that's another very important domain that we need to sort of understand. And if that wasn't all, we're also interested in the organization. What about the organization? How is it configured? What's the interface internally then between, I mentioned this in class before, between the sales department and the marketing department, which typically are completely different departments, usually organizationally within an organization, right? The members of whom typically hate each other too, by the way, right? So it's the ongoing kind of thing, sales marketing conflicts. So yeah, how does the organization work internally? What about inter-organizational kinds of relationships? How does that work as opposed to intra-organization? These are the kind of things at a macro level we seek to understand if we are to do our jobs appropriately well. So those are key things. And at the end of the day, consistent with what I'm saying, you know, we need to recognize that, yeah, we want to contribute to society, to individuals, to nations. We want to ensure that there is that contribution associated with everything we do also. So it's not only about maximizing profit. So again, as I said before, that is key. That's what we want to do for sure, but it's not only that. Perfectly. That's not necessarily, it's not to be viewed as the one and only monolithic kind of endeavor, right? Yeah, we want it, yes, it's important, but there are a lot of other things that are critically important here if we are to practice our discipline appropriately well. So that is the key thing. And so again, I will remind you, you know, when we talk about an overall marketing from a functional perspective and a strategic perspective, how does it all work? Well, it's all sort of embedded in this simple diagram, right? And you will know then that our entire course has been about this. And through, you know, our entire time together, over the last, 3 months almost, we have looked at each one of these major components here. And so together then we are positioned to move forward here and execute a carefully developed kind of a marketing strategy. And so that is key. And I don't think I need to sort of expand upon that. I've talked about it every class, so that is key. When we drill into this, of course, we realize that fundamentally, we need to determine where we are in a very broad way. And how are we going to compete and how are we going to move forward? And here then we talk about our core marketing strategy, right? And we spoke about 2 major kinds of ways by which we can sort of move forward with that. The first one is, what? Do you remember? 2 major approaches to our core marketing strategy? Can't hear you.
Eric, are you
No.
there?
No. That's channels of distribution. We can adopt a core marketing strategy based on mainly positioning, or we could be interested, we're opening up a new business, or we're bringing in new product development, bringing new product online. We want to grow it. We want to grow it. So growth versus positioning, right? And so when we talk about positioning strategies, think about that perceptual map that we spoke about in class, where our brands reside relative to some key attributes in the mind of the consumer. That's what positioning is all about. Central important concept in marketing positioning is. And so, yeah, we can sort of move forward, strategically thinking about positioning. How do we position ourselves and our brand vis-a-vis the competition in the minds of the consumer along some key attributes, right? That's what positioning is all about. What's the space that we occupy in the consumer's mind? And so we can focus on that. And so therefore, when we do that, there are two sort of major approaches that emerge out of that thinking. And that is, okay, well, maybe we should seek to differentiate ourselves. And if we seek to differentiate ourselves, we're primarily trying to differentiate ourselves within the product category, separate ourselves from everybody out there, to sort of make our product offering salient in the mind of the consumer within that product category, right? We want to differentiate ourselves that way. Or if we are occupying that same competitive space, we might need to go head to head with other competitor brands, right? Coke, Pepsi, same competitive space, head to head. Toyota Corolla, Hyundai Accent, head to head. Motel 6 and Travelodge, head to head, same competitive space. Hilton and Hyatt Regency, high-end hotels, high-end service, head to head, they're occupying that same competitive space. Cadillac, Lincoln Continental, same competitive space, head to head, right? And so as we have already discussed, in marketing then we do different things here, depending on whether we are going head to head or we're trying to differentiate ourselves. That's the kind of thinking we bring to bear. We talked all about that. Are there any questions on that? You want me to talk more about that? You don't want me to talk more about that? No? Yes or no? It's a catch-22, right? You don't want me to talk more about it. You want me to just continue, but yeah. But you don't want to say it. Okay. I get it. Okay, so let us carry on that. Okay, so core marketing strategy, positioning. What's the other one that I mentioned? Growth. And so when we talk about growth here, we think of this very simple 2x2 matrix here, right? Which we spoke about during our class number 1, our class number 2. We've spoken about it several times in the course. We have, let's see, this even exists in your textbook, right? So this is nothing new. So when we talk about growth, we say, okay, what do we want to grow and how? Right? And so to help us understand that from a strategic perspective, we say, okay, we can look at growth along 2 major dimensions. One dimension is about our customers, new or existing, or we could have a look at particular products, new or existing, right? So, 20 whatever years, 30, 40 years ago, 40, 50 years ago when McDonald's expanded into Moscow, for example, what was that? It was about new products to that market, right? It was about new products to that market to new customers, right? What happens when we want to sell more Big Macs to our customers in Ontario? Existing product, existing customers, we just want them to buy more, right? And what do we call that? Right.
Market penetration.
Right. And we spoke about that. So growth or positioning, at its core, these are 2 major fundamental ways that we do it. So we recognize then, as we were talking about before, that yeah, like everything else in life, marketing doesn't stand still. There are all kinds of expansions. Everything in marketing is in a state of flux, right, in business. And I would argue then that those businesses that recognize that, and there's marketers that recognize that, are well positioned
You
to
do
succeed
better
in
and
business.
be
It's
future
those, yeah, it's those, business leaders and marketers that fail to realize that, fail to change, fail to be flexible and nimble. These are the ones who fall by the wayside and go bankrupt, sadly. Right? So we don't want to be that way. We want to think forward all the time. We want to create these needs in the minds of the consumer. We don't want to just react. Right? We just sit back and react, we're doomed. Right? And like I told you before, I mentioned this several times, even guys like, Gates and Jobs and these guys, they all say, you have to really, especially true in tech, you have to try to create these customer needs. By the time you discover them, it's too late. Right? So that's a key thing. So that is important. So what fundamentally then drives these ever-evolving changes? Well, technology for sure. That we know for a fact. Technology is always changing. So that is a major driver. How about the internet relatively, right? The means, the infrastructure by which communication can occur online between consumers, and between the firm and consumers, and all that, between the marketer and customer. It's all driven by technology and the internet to a large extent. However, I would say this also, in the 1990s, when the internet was really exploding and taking hold, there were a lot of people, sort of in my world, on the scholarly side, that really started to build their reputations, if you will, on this rapidly evolving thing that was called e-marketing, and e-commerce, and they looked at that. And there were some reputations that were built fairly rapidly, in that domain. And that's fine, but at the end of the day, I would argue this, and I've been arguing this for decades, that fundamentally, whether you're operating in bricks and mortar and you're operating in real life, or you're operating online in that domain, it doesn't really matter too much because the basics of marketing remain the same, right? And that's the key thing. And that's why I tried to build the courses I did, to sort of ensure that you understand how this stuff works, because that way it gives practitioners flexibility, whether they do it online or bricks and mortar in front of you have that flexibility because these fundamental aspects weave themselves through the various situations, online, in person, and whatever. So that is key. We also recognize that what is one of the major forces also, this whole notion of globalization has had a huge dramatic impact, right? And this we know, we've spoken at length about this, and you guys know it better than anybody else. Globalization is huge, right? I mean, supply chains and that kind of thing where we manufacture in one location and then, or procure raw materials from one location, manufacture it in another, and then ship it to yet another location to be sold in yet another location, right? Globalization is here, it's with us, and so if we are to be successful, we need to understand it, right, is the bottom line. We did talk about that, if you remember, our session week number 2, I guess it was. And so at the end of the day, we also realize, consistent with what I'm saying, is that at the center of all activities, as I've said numerous times, is what? The consumer. And so, we need to have that deep psychological appreciation and understanding of the consumer, how they think, how they feel, and how they behave, right? Cognitively, affectively, behaviorally. We need to understand this kind of stuff if we are to be successful in our marketing efforts. And so we also realize that, the way that consumers change and evolve in their thinking has a dramatic effect. Just look at the, changing values, different approaches, with regard to consumer opinion, their values, their activities, their interests, evolve dramatically. The consumer today is certainly not the same consumer that existed, say, 50 or 60 years ago. on virtually every dimension, you can name anything, you know. Outlook, their outlook, political outlook, their outlook to, you know, expectations with regard to health, safety, their well-being, you know, outlook on some of the key contentious issues, outlook and opinions, say, on, you know, homosexuality, changed dramatically, transgenderism changed dramatically, right? So these are evolving changes, you know, that as marketers we need to recognize, right? We need to recognize if we are to do our job. So these are key things. So fundamentally then, we see ultimately that there has been a shift in the marketing as a discipline. And fundamentally, we see this shift having occurred over the last, you know, 100 years, I would say, over the last 100 years. We see this fundamental shift that's occurred broadly from more of a product-centric kind of an approach to more of a consumer, customer-centric kind of an approach, right? Again, which is completely consistent with everything we've talked about here and what I've said before. So we see that sort of evolution in thinking here, right? So, you know, initially more of a product kind of an approach, just build it, right? Here's a new product, let's just build it. Let's manufacture it. Great, let's just pump it out there. Let's sell it. But what about the consumer? Who cares? Let's just build it and sell it, sell. Right? More of a product focus here. So with that kind of a product focus, overall value then was attained from the product. However, you know, over time, we see kind of where we are right now, where we say, okay, well, that's nice, but, you know, really it starts with an appreciation of the consumer. So therefore, our real value is attained from the consumer, not necessarily from building stuff or selling stuff. Understanding the consumer and creating those needs for the consumer. Right? So that has been a major shift again from, as I say, more of a product-centric kind of an approach, as I describe it, to more of a customer-centric kind of an approach. And so, yeah, we see then that, you know, in terms of our overall evolution in marketing, from a philosophical approach, we see that, you know, lasting for about 60 years of the, you know, the turn of the 20th century, was, you know, more of a manufacturing kind of a disposition, right? So again, it was all about manufacturing stuff, building stuff, regardless of what consumers wanted or needed or cared for or anything else. It was all about building something, right? Henry Ford, he wanted that new car, and it was all about building that car, right? As it turns out, it's a slightly bunch of other things associated with that. He essentially created that need, I would say. Because before Henry Ford, nobody had really thought of a motorized buggy per se, but he did. Right, and then so out of, you know, building stuff, we got into sort of the age of pumping it out there, getting it out there, channels of distribution, getting it into the hands of the customer, right? You know, with the industrial age, you know, in North America, there were major communication arteries and transport arteries that were opened, you know, in the 1800s, leading into the early 1900s, and therefore positioning marketers, you know, in the 1960s into the 1990s to really push out physical distribution, push out that and distribution accordingly, right? And then, of course, there's another turn with greater technology. There was the whole greater connectivity between consumers with the internet, right? That occurred, like I said, starting around 1990, in the 1990s, where consumers became progressively more interconnected. And so therefore, they had access to the world's knowledge online, right? So there was a lot of information. So it's all about consumers getting smarter, getting all this information, right, which is key. And that, of course, brings us to kind of where we are right now. As I said, And that is, we're really in the age of the consumer. What do consumers think? What can we do about them, for them? How do we position them at the forefront of everything we do? And that's kind of where we are right now. So the focus right now is on the consumer. So fundamentally, as we drill into this notion of change a little bit more, we see then that, as I had mentioned at the outset, that there was this initial kind of focus on our 4P framework, which is good, and it's still important, absolutely. It's still a beautiful look at some framework. But it sort of evolved to where we are right now. And here, what I'm about to say then is really cutting edge CMO marketing thinking right now. This is the kind of stuff that marketers are thinking about. That is sort of keeping them awake at night, so to speak, right? The kind of stuff that they're trying to do. And that is, they're trying to really capitalize and execute what we can call the 4 E's. And when we talk about the 4 E's, the first and most paramount one here is this whole notion of emotion. And then here, I mentioned this to you before, right? So we recognize that, yes, from a marketing perspective, we want consumers to think about us, to think about our brand. Absolutely, we want them to do that, right? But even deeper than that, what we want consumers to do is to feel our brand. We want to drive our brand, our product, as I always say, into the hearts of the consumer. We want them to feel our brand, right? Get that feeling for our brand, That's ideally what we want. We do that by executing everything we spoke about, of course. But that's ideally what we are striving to do. And one of the major ways by which we can do it is to enhance engagement between us and the consumer. We want to talk more with them, communicate more back and forward with them. We want to build that interactivity communication-wise. We want to, engage the consumer, right, in everything that we do, right? Again, to facilitate that emotional connection, so to speak. And all of these are interconnected, so to speak. We want to enhance the overall experience in the mind of the consumer and the hearts of the consumers. It's about their experience, right? Critically important when we talk about brands, brand development, brand building, the experience, right? So much, of branding has to do with experience, right? Because, what is a brand? A brand is about the meaning that accrues to the consumer. How do they get that meaning? They get that meaning from experience. So experience is very, very important. And lastly, we want to give the consumer a sense of exclusivity. So they use our brand and they have a sense of feeling that they are getting something that others are not. And that's an important thing, right? They're getting it. When I get that new Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra, that would give the consumer a sense of exclusivity. You use your Apple computer, with that shiny Apple logo on it. That gives the Apple consumer a sense of exclusivity. You're using a cutting edge product, technologically sophisticated, technologically very sleek, sexy, seductive, premium priced, that is an air of exclusivity that the Apple consumer will enjoy. Am I right? So those are key things. So yeah, we have gone then to more of this 4E kind of framework here that is very important. So the other question becomes, how do we do all that, right? Well, we do it in a variety of ways, right? We can stimulate the consumer to tell stories about our brand. So we ideally, based on everything here, we want the consumer then to go back home at night, sit around their dinner table and talk about our brand, right? And so that is a key thing. We want to try to communicate with the consumer, build stories around our brand, connect with the consumer that way. So that is a key thing. I heard an interview, listened to an interview a while ago with the CMO of GoDaddy. And I don't know if you know what GoDaddy is, but it's a major multi-billion-dollar organization that really specializes in helping people build websites, gain an online presence, and they do all that kind of stuff, right? Online branding and all that stuff. And it's called GoDaddy. And she was saying that is her major concern. Essentially, she didn't say it in these words, but essentially she was saying, how can we do the 4 E's, right? And one of the things she didn't physically say was that they want to tell stories around the GoDaddy brand, right? To get consumers to talk about it, to enhance that connectivity and that salience in the minds and hearts of the GoDaddy brand. So that is a key thing. So yeah, this is really cutting edge marketing thinking here. You won't see this in the textbook, but this is cutting edge marketing thinking that comes out of the literature that I'm bringing trees. So that is key. So what about the future now? Where are we going in the future there as a discipline? Well, you know, we look at some of the traditional measures like ROI, ROE, ROS, and all of these financial marketing metrics, and we say, okay, are they dead? No, they're not dead. Should we continue to use them? Absolutely. Are they important? Absolutely 100% important. You know, they're good. However, my point simply is that we can't rely exclusively on these cold metrics. Like, we need to think bigger and broader into the whole realm of the 4E framework like I was telling you about, especially when we look at sort of the interaction, if you will, the intercept, if we look at it from a Venn diagram perspective, that intercept between experience and engagement. And we recognize that experience, that interaction between experience and engagement creates a very powerful synergistic kind of effect, which is larger together than the sum of the parts would be exclusive. So we recognize that, right? So there's a lot of momentum and power to be had by moving forward with this 4E framework that we mentioned. We also recognize, and this gets back to one of my opening points here today, with regard to how to enhance our credibility. Well, here's a part answer to that very sage question that I asked, and that is, how about protecting consumer privacy? Consumers expect privacy. They expect information that they provide to us as marketers. They expect that it won't be resourced. They expect that it will be protected. That is what they expect. And so therefore, we have a very substantial responsibility as marketers to safeguard that private information. And when there are failures in that regard, it basically represents a service failure, a brand failure on our part. And we don't want that. So we need to safeguard that information. Especially when technologically we have the capability of attaining big data, massive amounts of data on the part of consumers. So yeah, when MasterCard or Rona or Desjardins financials and these, as they have, experience these data breaches, that is a brand failure and that is bad. So we need to be cautious about that. So privacy there is, and security is key in this context. So therefore, it raises the question, we know how important it is, how can we understand then what this notion of privacy is all about? And this brings me to another critical point here. How should we conceptualize this notion of privacy? Well, we stated how important it is. But how does it reside in the mind of the consumer? And in order to practice it, we have to understand how the consumer thinks and feels about privacy. Here's the point, and that is that privacy should not be seen as a purely dichotomous variable. Yes or no? We should not be looking at privacy like that. Either you have it, check yes, or you don't have it, check no. We don't want to look at it that way. We need to look at privacy from the perspective of a continuum. It's like a continuum. It's a range. It's a continuous variable that goes from, very, very low or non-existent to very, very high. That's how we want to look at it. So why do I say that? Because in this global marketplace in which we are operating, we recognize that consumers have different appreciations of privacy around the world, right? So we don't want to look at it myopically, we want to think differently. So the consumer from China, for example, has a completely different approach to privacy from the consumer in, say, the Texas heartland, right? Which is different from the average Irish consumer, which is different from the average Iranian consumer, which is different from the average Canadian consumer, right? So my point here is that culture has a huge role to play on privacy. And as marketers, global marketers that think big, we need to recognize that. And so that is how we need to think about that very important notion that we call privacy and security. Are you with me?
Yes, sir.
So that is key. Furthermore, as we look into the future, we see that, based on technology, there are all kinds of very exciting, especially in the retail space, but there are a whole lot of very exciting avenues that are opening up for us based on advanced technology. Not the least of which is, for example, holographic technology. And here, when I use the word hologram, you know what I'm talking about? I need feedback. I'm insecure, I need feedback. Yes or no? Have you heard the word hologram before?
It's like a projection of an image.
It is. So a hologram essentially is a three-dimensional projection of some kind of an object, right? There are all kinds of objects, but that's essentially what it is. So in other words, with a hologram, a holographic projection capability, then the consumer then, as you see in that picture there, where you see those two looking at a ring, the consumer then could look at and manipulate three-dimensional representations, the virtual sense, of objects. And that's remarkably powerful. Remarkably powerful. And this technology, this is not pie in the sky stuff. This isn't futuristic. This exists right here and now. So the way that it can work in retail, which is what I was getting to, is that can change the things as retail. Just think, for example, from a business perspective, one of the major problems with retail is keeping inventory and space and all of the sort of merchandising sort of constraints existing with retail. So picture this, if you will. Let's say that we could have a retail space, say no larger than this room, whereby we could connect the consumer with billions of products from which they can choose. So they can walk in, they can set up to some kind of a holographic technological installation, draw up all kinds of products that they might be interested in, like the fridge, for example, bring it up and have a look at it. They could, based on their physical measurements, for example, and a picture that might be taken of them, and some kind of a holographic kind of capturing imagery that could be taken within a split second of them, they could sit there and look at themselves in a green shirt versus a blue shirt, or in how would I look in this black tuxedo versus a dark blue tuxedo, kind of a thing. And you can do all that all through holographic. You can select what you want and or remarkably powerful. So that's the kind of thinking and that we can bring there. And that's just an example, using holographic technology. Another major domain is what we call nanotechnology. 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 Nanotechnology is, well, nano, right? 10 to the minus 6 meters, so very, very small, right? Nano, very, very, very small. So we have nanotechnology whereby we can, use microprocessors and microtransmitters. Actually, nano should use it with nano transmitters that are just a fraction of the size of a pinhead. So just imagine taking something like that, putting it into, say, a garment, a button on a shirt, and therefore, as marketers, we can trace the development of this product to the shipment of the product to the retail outlet. We can capture the life of the product within the retail space, how many times it was tried on, when it was sold, who it was sold to, the consumption pattern that emerges out of that, how many times do they use it, who uses it, where do they go, et cetera, and captured ultimate disposal of the product, all through nanotechnology. And that is remarkably powerful. Just think of, we talk about big data, just think about all the data we could put there. Now, of course, I circle back then and we talk about privacy and security and other issues associated with that, right? So yeah, how do we warehouse all that kind of data? Well, that's a big problem. That's a big problem. And importantly, how do we mine that data? So data warehousing, data mining are key follow-on considerations here. But that's the kind of thinking that we bring to bear here. Furthermore, we also have this notion that we call neuromarketing.
Professor, sorry to
Yeah.
Are you saying that privacy may be a challenge of the nanotransmitters?
Sorry?
Are you saying privacy may be a challenge
Yes,
for the nanotransmitters?
that's exactly what I'm saying. If we use that technology, privacy is absolutely a key challenge for us as marketers. How do we overcome that? For example, do I want a marketer to know that I have worn, I'm going to say something that I do not practice. This is not me. I'll say it anyway, just to make the point. Do I want a marketer or an organization to know that I go to, say, strip clubs every Friday night? Right? Do I want them to know that? And that's pure fiction. I do not do that, by the way. I don't do that. I'm just using it. Yeah? Do I want marketers to know how I use products? No. I mean, that's privacy. So that is a key thing. Neuromarketing is an essential thing here too. And when we talk about neuromarketing, the AMA, the American Marketing Association, a number of years ago designated neuromarketing as the next big thing in marketing. I think, about 20 years ago, there was a lot of excitement about that. I think some of that initial excitement was personal that sort of waned a little bit. But notwithstanding, it is a very interesting thing. Some researchers are looking at. And so what is that all about? Here then we have the capability of looking at the consumer's neurological functioning, their biological functioning, physiological functioning responses to marketing efforts without having to rely on individuals to report back to us. In other words, how does it work? We could, and we do, this is the basis of it, we could take subjects, hook them up to an MRI, and show them different ad copies, different imagery, different, say, pricing configurations, different websites. We could do all that, right? Show them all this kind of stuff. And through MRI, watch the neurological functioning that exists. What fires up in the brain at that point where so therefore we can see into the brain and we don't need to rely on consumers to report back to us. Yeah, so those are some key things here. neuromarketing, nanomarketing, and that really represents sort of cutting edge. So yeah, what do we want to do then, really, as marketers then? Again, we want to really focus in on the consumer, the customer experience is key. As I said, we want to think in 3D. We don't want to think in 2D or monolithically here. We want to think big picture all the time, right? And that is key. We recognize and appreciate that, yes, absolutely, big data is in, and, cutting edge marketing to a large extent is about appropriate data mining and obtaining data, big data, multi-million cases in data sets, for example. So yeah, it is huge. This is really where marketing is going in the future. So those who are conversant in this domain will position themselves quite well moving forward. Furthermore, we also realize that in order to capitalize on effective technological interface, we can't just think, especially when it comes to interfacing with the consumer, especially when it comes to website design. We can't just think about laptops or desktops. Can't do that anymore. It used to be, we would think about a desktop or a laptop and then work backwards to mobility, to the tablets and to the phones and then tailor things forward. That's the wrong way to do it now. Now, website designers and marketers, they need to think mobility up front, primarily, secondarily website and laptop and desktop.
Desktops.
Secondarily. So that is key. And so, again, as I had mentioned to you before, one of the most important ways by which we can create that interactive website, one of the major ways by which we can draw the consumer into our website, take them on a journey within our website, leading ultimately to a conversion, i.e. sale, which is what we want to do. What's the best way to do that? We want to create that interactive website. We want to use some tools to help us do that. And one of the major ways recent research has shown is to, on the landing page, have some kind of moving picture, video kind of display. And I've already told you that too, by the way. But that, again, this is all cutting edge marketing thinking. You won't see any of this stuff in the textbook, right? But this is really what, the forward thinking marketer is trying to do here. And so, yeah, it's all about trying to create that engagement in the mind of the consumer. So anyway, wrapping up then, marketing is really everything. We need to make sure the consumer is at the center of everything we do. So with that in mind, I will remind you then that on Thursday at 8:30 in the morning, we have our final exam. I would again, caution you, do not be late. Keep checking the website here to ensure that there are no changes to any of this information, because it does change. So make sure that you are up to speed on all that. It's in Taldo 1 or 2, make sure you've got that. And again, I see some of you taking pictures, which is fine. But, make sure that you keep on checking, right? So if it changes, let's say, well, the professor is going to be here, it's here. Okay, so keep double checking and you guys figure that, right? So make sure you do that. Absolutely, the emphasis will be on the post-midterm material, right? But marketing, like I always say, it's not like calculus or or physics, where we can draw a line in the middle and say, okay, everything you've done there, just do the memory dump, forget all that stuff and focus on the second. It just doesn't work that way in marketing as a discipline. Everything is sort of weaves together. So therefore, yes, it does absolutely focus on the post-midterm stuff. And as I always say, really know the stuff that we cover in class school. And so therefore, I would also, emphasize that again, within the examination room, my expectation is that everybody will behave ethically and honestly, okay? And personally, other instructors might turn a blind eye to it, I do not. So therefore, play by the rules, you know what the rules are. play by the rules, everything will be fine. It's those students who choose to try to cheat, talk to others in the exam room, bad things happen. When that happens. And I'm sure bad things happen, so don't do that. Be honest. Keep your eyes on your own paper, just like you did during the midterm exam, by the way. That was very good. That was successful. So, this brings a repeat here. Do the same thing. Eyes on your own paper. Don't talk to anybody. Don't cheat. Everybody will be very happy. Breaches of that are not met with a positive approach, shall we say. Just have someone who's student from last fall who right? Okay, so with that in mind, I wish you all well. You studied hard. The final exam will be MCQs, same look and feel as the midterm. I'm not sure yet, I have still to develop it, but it'll be roughly the same number of questions, give or take a little bit. Probably, how many were on the midterm exam? 80 was it? 75? 80, so they'll probably be about 80, 85 or so. Go ahead and see who's. So it's the same look and feel as soon as I figure all that out. Okay? So with that in mind, wish you all well, keep in touch, stay cool, have fun. Good luck with that.
আমি আর বাসায় জমা দেয়
আমরা মিড টার্মের পরের ওগুলো দিয়ে শুরু করবো, এরপরে একদিন সময় নিয়ে মিড টার্মে যাবো। ঠিক আছে, সমস্যা নেই। সামারি হবে ভাই, আজকে আমার লাস্ট ক্লাস। এত লেট হবে, 8টায় উঠতে হবে না, এটা এসেছে যা ক্লাস তো এটা তো হ্যাঁ তেমনই। ইটস লাইক I think this is sort of an additional bonus sort of thing.